So now I'm going to go into the next level of the detail of how SRE is going to be playing a role on this whole thing, right? So we have this developer lifecycle of design, build, test, release, and post-release, right? We all know that at a post-release, it makes important in terms of monitoring availability, capacity, all of those stuff. We'll talk about error budget in a little while. So I will just eliminate some of the terms for us to first get a basic level of understanding. This is clear. Post-release, it's clear. Now let's talk about what does SRE need to do in the phases of design, build, and release. Okay, so this is something that I thought would be useful for us to assimilate the information if we say that we need to also have a development knowledge and other stuff. Now, let's call about the design phase. In design, what we do, we build requirements. So typically your requirements are built using, in the form of sprint, you look at user stories. So as a BA, you actually design your user stories based on personas. And the scope is basically what features or functionality that is going to be shipped as part of that particular sprint. Now, the non-functional requirements part of it, in terms of scalability, resilience, all of those stuff will have to come from someone as part of the operations. So think about that as an input which has to come. So which means you need to have one ops guy as part of your cross-functional team. You call them ops guy, you call them SRE, it doesn't matter. You have to have someone there, okay? We will talk about SLOs and SLAs for a while, but that is something that is very important. Is that clear? Any questions on the first one in terms of design, how SRE can contribute? So it actually kinds of minimizes future disputes over design, because you have also designed in terms of coding standards of what areas that we will kind of build in as part of developing the piece of code. Now let's come to building the product. Now, when you build a product, let's go to service design. So according to service design, we have something called as a service design package in version 3. Okay. So because most of the people are familiar with part of it. So we have something called as the acceptance criteria that we design in terms of specification. So Anjana, in terms of your specifications when you try to build a product or a service as part of service design package, what would be some of the deliverables of the service design package? What do you cover as part of service design package?
Yeah, so we cover the what are the requirements in terms of whatever is the customer requirements. Let's say portfolio, if you're talking about portfolio or the financial aspect of it. So I think these are something that we cater to in the service design part of it.
But also you kind of have this kind of specification in terms of service acceptance criteria. Where does it come? Does it come in service transition or does it come in service design?
I think it comes in service transition because once you design it, no, it comes in both. Actually, it doesn't come only in that. It comes in both.
Service design. Because you would not be able to measure it in service transition, because if you have not designed well, then how do we kind of measure it, right?
Yes.
So the question that I wanted to think about when you're trying to design a product or a feature is to look at your fit for purpose and fit for use, right? The utility and the warranty aspect, right? When you're trying to design, I need to ensure that it fits for purpose in terms of utility value, right? Which is in the form of features and the form of user stories, but also fit for purpose in terms of availability, capacity, security, continuity, right? So that is what we are trying to do. It is part of what kind of metrics and instrumentation we need to capture from the beginning of the life cycle, so that I am able to ensure that when I'm trying to build my product or service, I am able to fulfill the needs of that is being defined by the SRE terms. That makes sense in terms of build. So because we gain operational experience, we are able to feed that instructions on the way to do it. And we'll talk about metrics and instrumentation as part of telemetry and monitoring part of it that we'll do. The third one is the release part. So when we try to do a release, we have this big bang release versus what we call as the canary release or to set of users. So what's the benefit of doing a test to a certain kind of users rather than a big bang approach. So I'll go back to Suresh or Naren. What do you think is the benefit of doing a canary release or a release with a certain small set of users before it is rolled out to a larger client base?
To small set of users, we will come to know if there are any flaws in the product or whatever we have done.
Correct. So, what does it help? That is, we can get a quick feedback loop.
Yes.
And we will be able to test our process, make sure that everything works well, and then we start to push it forward, right? And so, which means that your ability to kind of improve your fit for use. So you will gain perspectives of the flaws and try to fix the flaws, and then start to move on, right? So that's the part of the release part of the whole cycle, right? So it reduces the operation burden, and maintenance becomes a lot more easier because you've designed well in advance with all the elements of reliability, scalability, capacity, and all of those stuff. Now let's talk the post-release, which is, I think you know that once it's deployed into production, some things you can never test in development. You can only test in production. And that feedback loop is where you'd have the monitoring devices like App Dynamics, New Relic, Dynatrace, Prometheus, that we will kind of look at elements that we will monitor, and then we will look at feedback in terms of where things are going down. And then we will take some action of how to go about doing that. So does it give you now a clarity around the end-to-end phase of how SREs can be a part of this life cycle and what benefits you can gain at every stage by engaging the SRE? Any questions? Okay, so that's my part of the first part of my context setting, and then I'll go back to the class. Okay.
Suresh.
Yeah.
Just have a quick on your previous slide, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'll just go back.
You are saying SREs will get engaged in design phase.
Okay.
So if SREs is being engaged in a design phase itself, is it not additional burden for the team?
No, it is not, because this comes from the point, Muthu, that as I said, in an agile world, we never used to consider operations team to be a part of the Scrum team. Now, what will happen is that I understand sometimes operations teams are very busy with their daily work and operational maintenance work. But what we are saying is that we should have an ops liaison or someone who could kind of feedback some information on a need basis, so that at least during design phase, they will get to know what are the NFRs. So it might not be a full-time work that they need to be available, but they will have to provide that inputs before they put that as part of the sprint backlog. So that's where I think the role of the ops people, they have different ways of working. Some people, they call it as ops liaison. That means they liaise with the development team, provide inputs as needed, and then start to go to do their own work. The essence is, if we get them involved early, then you can fix the defect earlier in the life cycle rather than looking at later, which will cost a lot more on the rework part.
Yeah, I can add some more input, Suresh, on top of it. Muthu, what happened is, in my previous engagements, there are some projects I think we did not involve the SRE guys at the beginning stage of the project, and we have engaged them in the later stage, and it was too costly for us. The reason being, people have developed the application which are not highly reliable, not highly available, kind of, and again we have to rework, and it has become so costly for us.
Exactly.
So if you had engaged the SRE at the beginning, or at least if you have looked in that angle, we would have cost of ownership would have reduced for us, and we would have released the product into market very quickly. Again, we have to go back to the chain. Again, we have to start from there. That happened for me in few engagements.
But also, you just think it's frustration for the team, but it's also even more frustration for the customer, because his wait time is going to be much more higher. Going back to the lead time, it's going to be even more longer. Will you be happy as a customer if your lead time is longer?
Oh.
So that's the whole point that we need to drive. We need to go back. What's the business impact of your problem? Internally, if you have a mess, what's the impact to the business? What's the impact on my customer? As long as you start to become more attentive towards that call, things will become magical. Unfortunately, we are only focused on IT-centric metrics. And customer doesn't care a damn about what you do. If it doesn't deliver value, if it doesn't give me faster lead time, you're just going to lose customers just like that. And that is why it is very imperative to start at the right foot from the beginning, rather than just looking at as a postmortem, which is actually done. And you learn lessons. I'm not saying that you should always do that. It's a good lesson learned, but that lesson learned. And that's one other problem that I have with agile teams. I don't have anything against agile teams. The sprint retrospectives have not shared beyond that Scrum team, which is how many of you have had a Scrum of Scrum, where the sprint retrospective learnings that you have got has been cascaded to a wider part of the enterprise. Be honest and tell me, has it happened or not?
No.
So what is the purpose? We have never understood the purpose of agile. We are just doing bits and pieces of aspects and we say we are doing agile. And that's my fundamental problem. We have not understood the philosophy of agile. And it's a culture change. It's not a part of using Jira or ServiceNow, and that's the easy bit. The biggest bit is the culture change. The biggest bit is, are we focused on sharing information? Are we focused on truly looking at lessons learned? And even in sprint retrospectives, how many times have you seen, oh, tomorrow is a retrospective, so I need to list down what are the things I learned? Does it happen like that? Your learning's happening in every day. So if it's a 2 weeks or 4 week sprint and you come on the last day of what I learned, will it help? I think we are doing it ceremoniously. It is not adding value at all. Okay. Any other questions on this slide before we go into the?
Yeah. So, Suresh, I just wanted to, just let me know what I've understood is right or not. So can I just say the objective of the SRE is to ensure a great customer experience and add value. And this team will liaise between the dev and ops, will provide the relevant inputs to both the teams at different stages, such as design, etc. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'll tell you, SRE is of a tall order. It is not easy to become an SRE. Okay, that's the ground rule 1. The ground rule 2 is, this is people who have spent sufficient amount of time in the industry, who understand the dev side of things, the ops side of things, but more importantly, have a customer-centric approach. So your driver to the whole equation is customer experience. And you don't need to be an expert in everything, but you need to have a reasonable background on understanding the challenges the dev happens and the ops happen. That's what I would look at it. So these are people who are about 10, 15 years, 15 years in the industry, who have gone through both sides of the spectrum. They understand some of the trends, some of the nuances of how it works at a fundamental level. And then we can have a team to kind of operate on the whole thing, right? So how do you reduce technical debt? What are sources of technical debt when you try to develop a piece of code? And how do you kind of eliminate such of things? And what are some of the vulnerabilities that will kind of expose when we try to do with open source coding? So there's so much of basic understanding we need to get for them to do a good job. But the customer experience part of it is a much bigger dimension of to it. But at the end of the day, the focus is on value. And that's where I think the end-to-end part will work across. We had on our 29th batch or 21st, 22nd batch, we had a senior site reliability engineer who had got 40 years of experience in the US batch. And he's been kind enough to give us a testimonial. And he said, his name is Jeff, and Jeff Hines, he works in the hospital industry. He said that, I have done anything and everything from mainframe to application rollout to infrastructure management, everything. And now I am being interested to kind of get more SREs kind of deployed in every product stream so that we can work on that. And it's simply exploding because we are not able to find out a good SRE who has got a knowledge about development aspect as well as operations, and is also able to focus on customer-centric approach. So my take on who would be the likely candidates to become SREs. Okay, so let's talk a bit about it. And so you're right, Anjana. I hope that added a little more context of what I would presume of that. But I'll let take 1 minute of what is in for service management people. If I look at service management people, and I've been given an opportunity to deliver some of the sessions for leading banks end to end, and all of the people are all either from infrastructure management, production support, level 1, 2, 3. Because ITSM is very close towards the production support, operations kind of environment, we are able to understand their plight much easier. So that's one part. The second part we'll talk about SLOs instead of SLAs and how it actually makes it across. So I see a good trend for ITSM people to kind of bridge the gap between dev and ops, but we need to still also understand DevOps. We need to still understand Agile, and we still need to understand some basic understanding of how the codings are done and how technical debts are done, managed, and cyber security in terms of the DevSecOps is working and all of those stuff. But we have a great chance to fit into that whole ream of things on the brighter perspective. I'm not saying that's the only part. Similarly, the developers who have got strong experience on that, if they get a bit understanding on ITSM, on customer experience and production support, plight, then they will also be able to do that fitment in terms of doing it. And it's going to be jack of all trades and master of none, in my opinion, because it's a tall order, but I think over a period of time, you will get better and better in what you do it. Okay, so any other questions before I go to the next slide? So we'll take a break after every 90 minutes. So 10 o'clock is over, 10, 12. So another 15 minutes, we'll take a break.